The auction house reeked of oil, sweat, and despair. Metal walls rattled with the rhythmic clang of a broken ventilation system, keeping time with the auctioneer's booming calls. A mass of different species filled the cramped space, all packed shoulder to shoulder under flickering neon lights, waiting to buy or sell lives. Behind shimmering energy barriers stood the merchandise. Some captives had already surrendered to hopelessness, their eyes glassy and unfocused. Others tried desperately to appear desirable, flexing muscles, batting multiple eyelids, or posing in whatever way might increase their value. And then there was her. She sat cross-legged in the back, shackled but oddly composed. A humming collar circled her throat, cuffs at her wrists and ankles glowing faintly as a reminder. She was property, not a person. Her chin was tilted downward, but not bowed. She no longer cared. Caring had been beaten out of her long ago. The traders who had dragged her across the stars had tried, unsuccessfully, to make her fetch a decent price. They muttered that she was useless, too fragile for labor, too strange for the markets, too proud to beg. She had been sold and returned so many times she'd lost count, like a broken tool no one bothered to repair. When her number was called, the auctioneer hesitated, unimpressed. Lot number 9043, well, you can see for yourselves. Laughter rippled through the crowd. She was shoved onto the platform, unsteady but upright, as the energy barrier fizzled away. Disappointment filled the room. She's tiny, someone muttered. No, just light, another replied. Look at those bones. She'd snap in a breeze. Others scoffed at her skin, a pale violet with a silvery sheen, and at her vast, dark eyes, which reflected neon light like distant black holes. Does it talk? A potential buyer asked. She's got a mouth, one trader sneered, earning chuckles. The girl exhaled slowly, resisting the urge to roll her eyes. She knew the pattern. Mocking bids, low offers, another cycle of chains and disappointment. Then, unexpectedly, a voice cut through the noise. I'll take her. Heads turned. She did too, expecting another arrogant warlord or greedy merchant. Instead, she saw a human. He didn't belong here. His patched jacket, scuffed boots, and messy hair suggested he was more dockhand than slave buyer. He scratched the back of his head lazily, as if he'd wandered into the auction by mistake. The auctioneer frowned. You want this one? Sure, the man said casually. A murmur spread. Sir, she isn't exactly premium stock. The auctioneer tried carefully. She's breathing, right? The human asked, squinting at her. She's got a brain? Silence. Then laughter. You're serious? Listen, he said with a shrug. You called her worthless. So how much for nothing? After a quick, irritated exchange, the gavel came down, 150 credits. The collar deactivated, shackles fell away. She stumbled, but the human caught her wrist, firm, but not harsh. She stared at him in confusion. Why? She asked at last. He tilted his head. What? You wanted to stay numbered? You don't even know what I am. I know what you're not, he said with a grin. Worthless. Her words failed her. That was new. Come on, he said, gesturing toward the exit. You look like you could use a drink. And for the first time in years, she walked away on her own. The neon haze of the auction faded behind them as the human guided her through the crowded streets of the port city. Starships loomed above like steel mountains, their thrusters leaving trails of smoke that mixed with the stench of fuel and fried street food. Vendors shouted, selling everything from cybernetic implants to questionable cuts of meat, while thieves brushed past unwary travelers. The girl kept pace silently, unsure what to make of her new owner. She had been dragged through countless ports, each more unforgiving than the last, but never had she seen someone buy a slave with such indifference, almost as if he had picked up groceries on a whim. Finally, she spoke. You wasted your credits. The human glanced at her. Pretty sure they weren't wasted. Her brow furrowed. I'm no use to you. I can't fight. I can't lift. I can't entertain. Good, he said simply. I wasn't looking for a fighter or a forklift. His tone carried no pity, no mockery. Just matter-of-fact truth that unsettled her more than chains ever had. They ducked into a shabby cantina, where flickering lights buzzed overhead and the air smelled of grease and old smoke. The human dropped into a booth, motioning for her to sit. She hesitated, then slid across from him. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked down. "I have none. Just a number." He leaned back, studying her thoughtfully. "Well, that's stupid. Everyone's got a name. I was never given one." "Then pick one," he said casually, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Her dark eyes blinked at him, baffled. "Names aren't chosen. They're given." He grinned. "Guess you just met the guy who gives them out for free." She stared at him for a long moment, then whispered, "Lyra." The word felt strange on her tongue, like a memory she hadn't realized she was carrying. "Lyra," he repeated, nodding. "Nice to meet you. I'm Jack." The cantina server, a surly reptilian, brought 2 steaming bowls of synth stew. Lyra stared at hers warily. Jack gestured with his spoon. "Go on. It won't bite." Tentatively, she took a sip. Warmth spread through her chest, richer than anything she'd eaten in years. She blinked rapidly, realizing tears were threatening. She quickly looked down. Jack noticed but said nothing. Instead, he slurped noisily, muttering, "Not bad. Could use pepper." Finally, Lyra asked the question gnawing at her. "Why did you buy me?" Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Because you were about to be ground down into nothing. And I hate seeing that happen." Her voice shook. "You don't even know me." He shrugged. "Don't need to. You're alive, and that's enough." She didn't know how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her like that, without expectation, without cruelty. It was disarming. For the first time in memory, she felt like more than a transaction. The following days blurred together as Lyra adjusted to her new reality. If this even was reality. She kept expecting the illusion to shatter, for Jack to reveal his true motives, to sell her again when she proved useless. Yet the days passed, and nothing of the sort happened. Instead, Jack treated her like a person. He took her aboard his modest freighter, the Wayfarer, a patched-together vessel that hummed and rattled but flew reliably enough. It was cluttered with tools, wires, and crates, but it felt alive. Lived in, unlike the sterile cages of slavers. Jack showed her a small cabin. "It's yours," he said, tossing her a blanket. Lyra froze. "Mine." "Yeah," he said, scratching his head. "Where else are you gonna sleep? The engine room?" She stepped inside cautiously, brushing her hand over the worn bunk, the tiny desk bolted to the wall. For the first time in years, she had a space that belonged to her. Jack didn't press her for work, but she soon found herself helping anyway. She held tools while he welded, fetched parts when he was buried under machinery, and even learned how to read the blinking console lights. At first, she expected him to snap when she made mistakes. Instead, he just shrugged. "Everyone screws up. That's how you learn." His patience confused her. In her past, failure had always meant punishment. Here, it meant another chance. One evening, as the ship drifted between jump points, Jack caught her staring out the viewport, eyes wide as she watched a nebula bloom in colors she had never seen before. "Beautiful, huh?" he asked. She nodded, words failing her. "You ever seen space like this before?" "No," she whispered. "Cages don't have windows." Jack's jaw tightened, but he didn't push. Instead, he said softly, "Well, better late than never." It was during one of these quiet moments that she dared ask, "Why do you keep being kind to me?" Jack tilted his head, thoughtful. "Because someone's gotta be. And if I can do it, why wouldn't I?" She looked at him skeptically. "Most don't think like that." He chuckled. "Yeah, well, most people are idiots." His bluntness made her laugh. A small, unsteady laugh, but real. Startled her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed freely. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, Lyra's posture changed. Her eyes lifted from the ground. Her voice grew steadier. She began asking questions, not just answering them. She even smiled sometimes, tentative but there. Jack noticed, but he didn't comment. He just kept giving her space, letting her rediscover herself at her own pace. And in the quiet of her cabin, Lyra realized something terrifying. For the first time in her life, she wanted to live. Not just survive, not just endure, but live. And that was because one stubborn, ridiculous human had decided she was worth something. Life aboard the Wayfarer settled into a rhythm that Lyra had never known, one that felt startlingly close to peace. The hum of the ship became a lullaby, the cluttered hallways a strange kind of home. And yet, in the back of her mind, a whisper of doubt always lingered. This cannot last. Nothing good ever does. That fear was tested one night when the ship docked at a sprawling trade hub. The port was alive with smugglers, merchants, and drifters from every corner of the galaxy. Lyra stayed close to Jack as they moved through the crowd, her instincts warning her of predators hidden in plain sight. Sure enough, it wasn't long before she was recognized. A slaver, broad-shouldered and scarred, blocked their path with a cruel grin. Well, he sneered. Thought I'd lost that worthless thing for good. Guess she's yours now. I'll buy her back. For a discount, since she's defective. Lyra froze, chains of memory snapping tight around her. She braced for Jack to bargain, to hand her over without protest. That was the way of the galaxy. She was nothing but a transaction. But Jack's voice cut through her fear, steady and sharp. She's not for sale. The slaver laughed. She's property. Always will be. You really think one human's word changes that? Jack stepped forward, eyes hard. She's not property. She's Lyra. And if you try to touch her, you'll regret it. The slaver sneered, reaching for his weapon. Before he could draw, Jack moved faster than Lyra thought possible. A single strike, a twist, and the slaver hit the ground groaning, his weapon clattering uselessly away. The crowd scattered, uninterested in interfering. Jack turned back to Lyra, offering his hand as if nothing unusual had happened. You okay? Her chest heaved, but she nodded. Something in her shifted in that moment. He hadn't just bought her freedom, he defended it as if it were priceless. Later, back aboard the ship, she whispered, You risked everything. For me. Jack shrugged, leaning back in his chair. Didn't feel like much of a risk. Seemed like the obvious choice. Her throat tightened. No one's ever chosen me before. He gave her a small smile. Get used to it. You're stuck with me now. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled with the quiet hum of the engines and the steady beat of her own heart. Then, softly, she said the words she had been afraid to believe. I don't feel worthless anymore. Jack raised his mug in a mock toast. Good, because you never were. Lyra looked out the viewport, stars streaking by as the ship slipped into faster-than-light travel. For the first time, she saw them not as unreachable lights, but as destinations. Possibilities. The girl who had been sold for nothing finally understood. Her fate was no longer in chains. It was in her own hands. And it had changed because of a human who refused to see her as worthless.